Well, this morning we are looking at Baptist history and 50 Baptists that everybody should know. And this morning we're on number 45. So we're getting to the end of our 50. And this morning I want to look at a dear man of God that many of us are aware of and know, but Dr. Lee Roberson. And Dr. Lee Roberson was born in a two-room log cabin in 1909, in November 1909, on a farm near English, Indiana, which is as far southern part of the state. In 1911, they moved to another farm in Louisville, Kentucky, where his father farmed and worked different jobs on streetcars and built homes for a living. At the age of 14, he was led to the Lord by a faithful Sunday school teacher, Miss Daisy Hawes, and joined the Cedar Creek Baptist Church there near Louisville. Lee Roberson was gifted with a tremendous singing voice, and I don't know if many people know that just from knowing him in his later ministry, but he was widely known through Kentucky and southern Indiana as he sang on the radio and was involved in college productions at the University of Louisville, and doors began to open in the field of secular music. He was offered a lucrative contract with the Nashville Symphony in Tennessee that no doubt would have led him to the top of the operatic world. A very interesting time in his life. However, he felt this was not what the Lord wanted him to do. And much like some of the other men we've studied, they knew that God wanted them to do something else, and this was not it, even though this was a strong pull from the world to follow this occupation. And so he refused to sign the contract, and right after that, God called him to preach. The first church that Brother Roberson pastored was in Tennessee when he was going to college. It was there that he discovered through the doctrine of the imminent return of second coming of Christ. And it was this that became his impetus for faithful service and fervent soul winning. About 10 months after joining the ministry, he was overwhelmed with an invitation by a very prestigious church, the Temple Baptist Church of Memphis, to take over the music and visitation programs. So without seeking God's will, he accepted the call and moved to Memphis. Almost immediately, he realized that this was not God's will, and 5 months later, he resigned to pastor where God wanted him, and that was the Greenbrier Baptist Church in Greenbrier, Tennessee. And people didn't understand, but he knew it wasn't God's will, and he needed to be where God wanted him. After 3 years at Greenbrier, in Greenbrier, Tennessee, he left the church and went into full-time evangelistic work in 1935. He served with the Birmingham Baptist Association, a Southern Baptist association there in Tennessee, and he had many, many meetings in the Birmingham area as an evangelist. It was while he was in Birmingham that he met Miss Caroline Allen, who in 1937 became Mrs. Lee Roberson. And on the first Sunday in 1937, he became pastor of the First Baptist Church in Fairfield, Alabama. They would have 4 children, Dr. and Mrs. Roberson, Leanne, John, Joy, and June. And their baby Joy passed away died at the age of 2 months in 1946. And some of you will know the Camp Joy is named after her, the camp that they started in her honor, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. But really what we know him for and his legacy perhaps as a great man of God began in 1942 when he was called to pastor the Highland Park Baptist Church in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He had a great reluctance to go there, but God made it clear that this was his will. And then for 40 and a half years, he would serve the Lord there at Highland Park Baptist Church, and he invested himself in the ministry of that church. Really, the entire county and city of Chattanooga. He was loved as a pastor, preacher, confidant, and friend with all that came in contact with him. And during his tenure as pastor, the church reached a membership of over 12,000 people. And in 1955, as many of these men did, as they saw the modernism coming into the Southern Baptist Convention, he pulled his church out of the Southern Baptist Convention. But during his tenure as pastor, more than 61,000 people professed Christ and followed him in Believers Baptism. Just tremendous work there, as many of us know in the church there in Chattanooga. In 1946, he founded Tennessee Temple University to train young people for God's service. And the history of that school, from its founding until his resignation in 1982, is an amazing story. Tens of thousands of pastors, missionaries, full-time Christian workers have spread around the world through what God did there through Dr. Roberson. And just the three outreaches there that are were his main focus, of course, Highland Park Baptist Church, as we had mentioned, Camp Joy, which for years, I believe it still is a camp, but for years, 3,000 children were per summer were invited and enjoyed free camping under the gospel. That ministry is a story perhaps has not been told of how tremendous that ministry has been over the 50, 60 years. And then there was a thriving chapel extension ministry where he, as part of the college, he formed, as it turned out to be, 73 chapels in 3 states, resulting in thousands of people being saved, churches planted all over that 3-state region. Those were his main ministries there. And Dr. Roberson continued to preach well past his 95th birthday, and the Lord took him home on April 29, 2007, at the age of 97. And I always mention this because some of our favorite preachers, visiting preachers that we have come here, are graduates of Tennessee Temple, trained by Dr. Roberson. I think of Clarence Sexton even, David Cloud, Dr. Bob Kelly, Dr. Mike Allison, just to name a few, men of God that went through Tennessee Temple under the ministry of Dr. Roberson. And the heartbeat of his message can be summed up in his life verse, Romans 8:28, and we all do all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. And I think his life could be summed up in the word faithfulness. That's how I think of him, just a faithful man of God, maybe his trademark for many, many people that knew him. He was a key leader for over 65 years and one of the most influential preachers in fundamentalism. And I want to thank the Lord this morning for his servant, Dr. Lee Roberson. And as we try to do, let's take a few minutes and listen to part of a sermon of Dr. Roberson.
Are lost without Jesus Christ. And we must remember that the gospel must be given to them. And unless we bring the message of the Lord Jesus to them, and unless they get saved, they're lost forever. There must be about everything we do in the church, out of the church, everywhere, in the Sunday school, in every department of our work, there must be an urgency that sends us on. But in spite of our fast pace in this world, we get slower in the churches all the time. In spite of the fact that cars go faster and trains run faster when they run at all, and airplanes fly faster, and everything moves on, and jobs are changing, and way of life is moving around us, we get slower in the main business. And here's the task that takes every bit of urgency that God could give to us, that we might go and witness to souls and tell people of Jesus Christ, and of His willingness and His power to save. We've got to see people. We've got to see them lost and condemned without Christ. We've got to see the urgency of the situation. The great need of this hour is for compassion. Every Christian needs to burn with a holy compassion for souls. We must turn away from the spiritual dry rot that's ruining all of our churches and is making its way into the hearts of so many Christian people. We must see people lost and condemned and bound for hell. And we must hasten urgently with the gospel of grace that they might come to Jesus Christ and be saved. Oh, my dear friends, I want you to see it. The answer is love. I don't know anything else. After all of these years of preaching, I don't know how to make people win souls. I don't know how to make myself go out and talk to someone else. I don't know how. The only thing that I can say is if I'm going to be a soul winner, I've got to love others. And if I'm going to be an evangelist, I've got to love others. And if you're going to win souls, you've got to love souls. In spite of their meanness, in spite of the way they look, in spite of everything, you've got to seek to bring souls to Jesus Christ because you love them, because Jesus loved them, and because Jesus died for them, and you're trying to bring them to the Son of God.